Reduction Task Force Law and Justice Council meeting for March 16th, 2026. And I will, before we get going further into the agenda, I'm going to read the land acknowledgement. Before we begin, we acknowledge that we are gathered on the traditional and unceded territory of the Lummi, Nooksack, Samish, and Semiahmoo people who have cared for and tended this land since time immemorial. Truth and acknowledgement are critical to building mutual respect and connection across all barriers of heritage and difference. We begin this effort to acknowledge what has been buried by honoring the truth. We pay respect to their elders, past and present. Please take a moment to consider the many legacies of violence, displacement, migration, and settlement that bring us together here today. And please join us in uncovering such truths at any and all public events. I'd just like to note that our last J-Pop meeting had just a fantastic panel with members of the Lummi Nation and the Nooksack tribe. And speaking of their lived experience with our jail and criminal justice system, and I highly recommend everybody watch that. One announcement before we get going. We are having our second workshop, community engagement, this week, Thursday, March 19th. At the Linden City Annex Chamber at 205 4th Street between 6 and 8. And we'll be presenting around the jail, updating the public, getting feedback. If Riley is on and you'd like to speak to any detail around this, Riley, feel free to speak up. But it'd be great to have everybody there.
Yes. Hello, everyone. Riley Sweeney with the County Executive's Office. This is going to be our second community engagement workshop. So the first one was very much the science fair model. This will be present and then listen. So we will be sharing details about where we are in the process for the planning for the behavioral care center and for the jail. And then we'll have an open public comment period where people can share their thoughts and perspectives on what they've learned and where we think we should be going. You know, we are in the validation phase for this project, so we really need people to weigh in now because those decisions will have ramifications throughout the project. So please join us 6 to 8 o'clock up at the Linden City Annex this Thursday. See you there.
Very good. Thank you for that. I'd like to thank everybody for being here for an important conversation. As you recall, last month we had a robust conversation around the scenarios that were presented to us around the jail and behavioral care center. There was also a robust conversation at the FAB meeting, the Facility and Finance Advisory Board meeting this last week. And I'm thankful that we have not only put aside plenty of time today to continue the discussion, ask questions. We have all the right people in the room, I believe, to have this discussion. And in fact, tomorrow we have arranged for a meeting time. We did a special notice for this in case we need this extra time to continue today's discussion. It'll be 11:30 to 1, and it will be in place of the joint meeting of the Legal and Justice and Behavioral Health Committees. We're going to see how today's conversation goes, and if we need that time, we can take it. The other thing to note is that unless I'm hearing otherwise from Kayla, our April meeting of the IPRTF can also be dedicated to a conversation around these issues. We're going to be having that meeting right before our deadline. Kayla, is that correct? I just want to make sure
That's correct.
that okay. All right. So hopefully there'll be so much more information, I believe, by it delivered at the end of this month and before our next meeting, and several JAW meetings and FAB meetings, or at least one FAB meeting, to inform us. So this is not the end of the conversation, but an important part of it. All right. Um, So the purpose of today is really to review where the planning conversation currently stands, and surface new information since the last meeting, and identify questions and guidance the task force can provide to inform potential county council action. And I was wondering if, Kayla, you might want to kind of give us a brief recap. Your team did a great job of presenting last month, but maybe just a brief recap, and then anything that you'd like to say about new information.
Yeah, just in terms of what our next steps are, Peter.
Yeah, I think that would be good. Just, not not everybody has dedicated their entire lives to this project and come to this meeting and could use some reminding what the scenarios were and what has
Oh,
happened since. I'm not talking about detail. I'm not expecting another presentation on the scenarios, but just a brief recap of where we are.
yeah, yeah, sure. Happy to do that. So, the the design build team produced four initial scenarios of a potential jail and behavioral care center build for the purposes of kicking off this discussion and trying to sort of take the temperature of decision makers around what direction we want to head in. Those scenarios used 480 beds as a fixed variable, which was the number of beds that came out of last summer's jail capacity study, and then had different levels of budget ranging from 170 million to over 300 million to show how much you can essentially buy in terms of operational and behavioral health features at different levels. That was presented to the county council and the IPRTF and the Finance and Facility Board for some initial reaction. And simultaneously, we've been working with the cities and the council on discussing a potential budget framework for this project and hoping that we near a decision on that soon. So the idea is sort of what is the different levers that are available to create the financing of this project and the behavioral care center. How much do we want to reserve for the behavioral care center? Those conversations. So those conversations are ongoing. And then going forward, we have some additional information forthcoming from our consultants. There's going to be a jail capacity analysis and some specialized housing recommendations. So this will be sort of another iteration and improvement upon what we presented last summer. We are working on a behavioral health analysis to talk about pathways towards diversion, operational costs of the behavioral care center, sort of what type of treatment is needed in different areas of the jail. And then we are refining scenarios as we sort of reach some level of direction. I don't know, I use that word loosely related to the budget. So we're honing in right now on what does a jail look like if we had a $205 million budget. And an additional $25 million reserved for a behavioral care center. And then we are talking about how do we sort of tweak that scenario with slightly more or less beds in order to sort of reflect whatever policy direction is provided by the Finance and Facility Advisory Board and County Council. So that information is all forthcoming over the next few weeks. And then there are, not including today, about 14 touch points for a conversation, discussion, and decision making between now and the end of April. And then we are hoping that the County Council makes some decision on scope and budget at that time. So Peter, does that get at what you were hoping for here?
Yeah, that's great. There are many people on this call today who have been in a variety of meetings, and I would like them to speak up if you'd like to bring forward any points or information that you feel would help the group to understand where we are And then, in addition to that, Barry, I'm wondering if you might, as a member of the council and of the IPRTF, help us as a group to understand how we can be the most helpful in making a recommendation to the county council. So, Barry, why don't we start with that if you're prepared to do so, and then we can circle back to anyone who would like to kind of bring us to the present moment.
Sure. So as you know, as Kayla just described, we're getting ready to hone a lot of these decisions down here in the next couple of months. And the council is, we have right now, we have our ears wide open and listening to folks like the IPTRF and the community event we're going to be having Thursday night. So the council right now is really taking all this in. It's a lot of information coming, and there's a lot more to come. So, yeah, I think that's the best way I can summarize it, Peter, is that me as a council member right now, I'm doing a lot of listening and trying to really get all the perspectives of folks that have been on this project for a long time and those that haven't, those that are new to it and that have opinions. So that's basically where the council's at right now. We're just learning and listening.
And are you thinking that a recommendation from the IPRTF will be helpful to you coming out of our April meeting? How is the timing on that?
I don't have Kayla, remind me, when is that meeting for intro?
Yeah, so I don't think we need to intro. We're not talking about an ordinance here, and the council's going to be discussing on a parallel path. So the final council meeting in April, where we're hoping for a decision, is April 28th.
Okay, so that kind of gives you an idea of, the timeline. So
Okay.
we'll be looking at that several job meetings that council members are going to be, three council members are members of that committee. So there'll be a lot of learning, intense learning during that period of those meetings as well. So
Okay, very good. And again, today's meeting is around discussion. And Arlene, I see your hand. I just want to put out the request for anybody else who has information that they would like to share, bringing us up to where we are right now. Arlene, go ahead. You are muted, Arlene.
I think it's very crucial information that I want to ask this question, which is Kayla. I don't notice any mention of a 24-hour crisis clinic in your presentation. Has that been eliminated?
No, and you'll see that reflected in the behavioral health analysis that's forthcoming. So the plan right now is to build it. So the behavioral care center was really initially conceived as a, a treatment alternative to incarceration, so an inpatient treatment unit. We have now expanded the behavioral care center, so we are planning to co-locate some sort of crisis unit with inpatient treatment. The idea with that, even if the crisis unit is not technically licensed as a 23-hour care center, because we have concerns about the insurance reimbursement, that we would be able to sort of co-locate some sort of, at a minimum, referral and intake, potentially some urgent care psychiatric services, and then build it so if the legislature does solve the operating problem with the crisis relief centers, we could then locate a 23-hour center essentially in the lobby of the behavioral care center. So that is not off the table, and continue to advocate at the state level that there's operational viability and planning to build the behavioral care center so it could support that licensure.
So you're postponing it, right?
Sorry, Arlene, I couldn't hear you.
It.
Could you repeat that?
You're postponing it. You're
No, we're not postponing it. We are
postponing
co-locating it with the behavioral care center, but not planning to bring the license and
the
operator
crisis center.
online until we have assurances from the state that they are planning to.
Because this is quite important in terms of our agreement with our community. Do you hear me? Kayla, do you hear
Yeah,
me?
I think we're disconnecting. So let me try to explain what we're planning. And then, because I think the Wi-Fi is not working. So we are planning to co-locate a crisis relief facility with a behavioral care center. So that is going to be part of the architectural design. If
Okay.
the state has not solved the operating issue with the crisis relief center by the time we open the facility, then we will wait to activate that license and bring the provider in for crisis relief services. And so we are building the facility to accommodate this, but we don't yet know the timing on when it will be operational.
Thank you very much.
Thank-
I see.
Thank you very much. Sheriff Tanksley, go ahead.
Yes, and thank you, and good morning to everyone. It's really interesting because in the last 15, 20 years, what report a person wants to read, or what consultant report a person wants to read, that their thought process is based upon that report. There isn't a shortage of consultant reports or reports. I mean, again, going back sometimes 20 years. And in fact, Kayla just talked about another consultant report that we're going to be looking at. I think if we could just take a minute to think about the jail facility without thinking about the behavioral care facility. When I say without thinking about it, that doesn't mean it shouldn't happen, because it should. But I think because the behavioral care facility is out of custody, that when we look at the jail itself, we have to think of that almost independently of the behavioral care facility, unless somehow we're going to tie the behavior care facility to the jail. And that doesn't seem to be the case. I guess it could be the case depending on how that's laid out. So when we think about the jail and we think about the number of beds and we think about the services and the programming within the jail, that should be a separate conversation versus the behavior care center, because I think oftentimes we get the two mixed up, and oftentimes we're talking about two different things at one time. So when we look at the funding available, when we look at the programming, I think everyone knows my stance that I believe that we should have 600 beds. Okay, I don't think we're going to get 600 beds, right? So right now we're talking about 480, potentially 480. So within that 480, what programs are we going to have for people that are inside the jail? All the voters, all the constituents I talked to mentioned, hey, Tank, we need as much behavior care and rehabilitation and reintegration systems within the jail itself. If we wasn't having a conversation about the behavioral care center, we would be talking about, and I think we are talking about, all the things we could do inside the jail. But also we have to remember that in the interlocal agreement signed by the small cities, which Kayla mentioned earlier, that booking restrictions is something that we have to think about. So, for example, we always should have some type of diversion. within our systems. And many of you have traveled across the country looking at different jails and looking at their different diversions. And what works for them might not work for us. But we certainly should try to divert low-level offenders to alternative programs, without a doubt. But doing that is not the job of the sheriff. Doing that comes from the courts. Doing that comes from the prosecutor's office. Doing that comes with working with the public defender's office. So when we think about the jail, the number of beds, diversion, and all the different programming, it's so many people that's involved in that. So I just want to make it clear that the sheriff operates the jail. That when you talk about diversion, there are other departments that has to be involved for that to be successful. And I don't believe the term, if you build it, they will come. For example, if we built a jail with 1,200 beds, does that mean we'll fill it with 1,200 people? How about 3,000? So I believe that the number of beds we build and the programming and how we operate it depends on the number of beds. When you look at the number of beds, I don't think you could think about 2026. We've been talking about 2030. We're spending millions of dollars. You have to be thinking about 2040. You have to be thinking about 2045, about 2050. And I know that sounds like a long way away, but that's only 25 years away. So these are some hard decisions with little money. So I just want to put it out there that as the sheriff, we operate the jail. And I want to make sure that we live up to our promises of the people. And the promise is to build a jail with enough capacity and enough services for those people in the jail. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheriff. Who would like to make a statement or ask a question next?
Maybe I could.
Yes,
share a
please
little
go
bit.
ahead.
I was a little bit late, so forgive me if I repeat anything or veer us anywhere, but a month ago, the Incarceration Prevention and Reduction Task Force, this body, received our first presentation, right, with the 4 scenarios that the design build team came up with for what we're going to build. And there's a few things I just want to name out loud that are helpful for me. One is, I think the magnitude of this project heightens so much. Like there's just, I feel the pressure of, gosh, I want our community to get this right. We get one chance to do this. We get one chance to spend $300 million over 30 years. And I think we're all aligned in the values of, we want people to get care. We want people to get treatment. We recognize there are public safety issues and booking restrictions and that there's accountability, and we're looking for the best way to make accountability and rehabilitation and restoration part of this project. And there are many layers of discussions about, it's like this complex grid. There's the facility, the budget, the crime rates and population growth, the diversion programs and their effectiveness, the ordinance and what the commitments to voters are, the real budget and construction and delay costs. Like there's a lot of pressure. And then you also look at what level of conversation are we having? Are we having a values conversation and what we believe about the philosophy of humans? Are we having a policy conversation? Are we having a budget conversation? Are we having a program conversation? Are we having a facility, design conversation about what the rooms need to look like? And so facilitating facilitating forward progress, I have a lot of compassion and empathy for the executive's office right now, because as Kayla mentioned, there's 14 touch points between here and now, or the end of April. And all of those groups are also differently configured. So some of us are in all of those, some of us are in one of them. And so the conversation is fragmented and always time bound. And so today, Peter and I wanted to just open up to say, hey, we got some big data last month. This body has a role and an advisory, or ordained to advise the county council on incarceration prevention and reduction. We'd like to be helpful. So this is space for us to also process, I think, a little bit of, okay, it's been a few weeks. What, at all those levels, at the values level, policy level, and in all of those buckets, this is space for us to share perspective. And I'd love to let the conversation go. What are the questions that people have? Peter and I can help with, okay, are we talking about budget? Are we talking about beds? What's important to people? And then we can start to see where there's consensus from the IPRTF that we could give direction to county council, or give, here's recommendations. And then where there's disagreement, which I think is also okay. And that's just part of democracy, right? So I would just want to frame that and just say, we'd love to hear the thought. We didn't have a lot of time last month to talk about what does this information mean? How are we reacting? How are we absorbing? And what have we processed since then? So, Melora, I see your hand up.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to share some thoughts from Health and Community Services, specifically the perspective of how we approach behavioral health needs in our community when those individuals are involved in the legal system. I think there are two primary priorities for us. One is that when people can be diverted, they should be, and that requires that diversion happens at every intercept of the legal system. That means law enforcement, prosecutors, public defenders, courts. The more upstream we go with that, the better, meaning that the more law enforcement and prosecutors can review, assess, and then divert when appropriate, we would ask for that to happen. And in order to divert, we have to have places and programs for people to go. So we can't talk about diversion without having people either going to a facility or going into a program with wraparound services. The second piece is that for the people who do need to be incarcerated because there is a public safety concern, and we know that that is true, that we need to have services inside the jail. We need to be able to deal with behavioral health crises, medical concerns. And, right now our current funding covers crisis and basic behavioral health services, but that's really just the beginning. We would advocate that we are doing screening at intake, that every single person that comes into the jail is being screened for both substance use disorder and mental health at the time of intake. We would want detox inside the jail, both medical and SUD, and all of these things would require an expansion of the existing services. We would want IOP, which is intensive outpatient services. That would be classes and supports inside the jail, plus skill-based classes like anger management and parenting. And then we want to make sure that there's a medical unit embedded inside the most acute housing units so that people aren't having to be moved to a medical unit, that we have kind of the highest level of risk management to make sure that we're keeping people safe while they're incarcerated. The behavioral care center out of custody is a prosecutorial diversion program. And a facility like that will absolutely benefit this community, but only if it's used at its full capacity as a legal diversion. So I'll say again, we can talk about diversion, but if our legal system partners aren't willing to divert, and I think in this community they absolutely are, and that is wonderful. We need to build on that momentum and make sure that we are utilizing it as a way to keep people from needing a public defender. right? Keep somebody from having those charges, and only when appropriate. But we have to be able to screen, and we have to be able to do that both at the place of incarceration and also in the community. So yeah, I'm happy to speak more on this, but just wanted to share our thoughts there.
Melora, before I get to Chief Mertzig, I was wondering if you might reflect upon the scenarios as they've been presented and what you have said would be possible within these given scenarios.
Unfortunately, I'm not part of the design team, so I'd need to look to Caleb to speak to more details on that, or Chief Erickson. Again, as we get to how much money we have and what design pieces will be prioritized, again, I would say the minimum growth we are hoping to see is screening at intake, an expansion of detox services, and then the ability to do community service supports inside the jail. Those things aren't currently happening in that capacity, and so we would advocate that in any scenario that is included.
Mertzig, go ahead.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to, Heather did a phenomenal job of just kind of setting the table for this and just kind of articulating exactly the way that these conversations go and really honing in on like what are we really talking about here. So I super appreciated the framing of this conversation. I felt like I needed to speak a little bit about what the sheriff said and also Melora. The Bellingham Police Department absolutely agrees that we want to divert at the lowest level possible, and we know that that lowest level is that the encounter with law enforcement typically is really early on. And in order for that diversion to be effective, there has to be an option of jail or what. And with any kind of restriction, um, there isn't an option. And it's very well known in this community that there are jail restrictions. I've seen many body-worn camera videos of people telling my officers, you can't book me, the jail is not accepting women. They know what the system is and they want to use that system. I will again reiterate that there is a economic evaluation that occurs with every crime. Believe it or not, people will consider what are the chances of getting caught. And if I am caught, what will happen to me? And when it is well known in this community that I can shoplift and nothing will happen to me, then that's what we see. So I just want to reiterate that we also support diversion. We want to do everything we can to reduce recidivism. I want a jail that keeps people from reoffending for sure, but that part of the system is kind of what we have the least impact on. But we absolutely support those programs. And I just think that, just to kind of go back to what the sheriff said, 480 is the number now. But that's the number we need right now. 600 is probably what we'll need in the future. And so there's been conversations about data, the lack of data, the lack of good data. But I think what really hit home for me on the last finance meeting was that the data is as good as it's going to get right now. And it's tough data because it's something that there's a lot of unmeasurables in there. And I think whenever you're dealing with criminal justice statistics, like for example, how do you track crime prevention? You can't track numbers that you don't know. And so that's kind of where we're at when it comes to the amount of people that would have been booked but weren't. And so that's a tough number to add in there. I think that I do trust the design team and all the research they've done to determine that 480 number. And so yeah, that's all I got for now.
Okay, thank you very much, Chief Mertzig. Before we go on to Maya Lisa, are there any attendees who would like to be promoted so you can join this conversation? If you could raise your hand, and Jill, if you could promote anybody who raises their hand in the next little bit, that'd be great. Maya, go ahead.
Thanks. Good morning, everybody. My introduction to the proposed designs, um, I I noticed that, and I think many people noticed that there are a lot of things lacking in the proposals in terms of visitation, programming space, really having a setting that's going to be conducive to providing the services we think are needed in the jail. And the question came up at one of those meetings to Kayla, what are they looking at, what number of beds we could have that could allow the type of programming and space that we think is needed. And I understood that the design team was going to look at that and come back with some response. And I don't know when or if that information has been shared or not. So I guess I'm a little curious about that.
Yeah. Thanks, Maya. I anticipate by the end of March, we'll have that information to share with this group and others.
Stark, go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to speak briefly to what Chief Mertzik was talking about. She's right about a great deal. When police reform hit the streets and officers were no longer able to chase our clients, it took them about 5 minutes to figure that out. And we saw a real uptick in felony eluding cases, and the word does get around on the street when there are restrictions placed on bookings and other restrictions placed on law enforcement. However, I do want to push back a little bit on that because I don't think booking restrictions are the evil that is being presented to the various bodies in the community. There are jurisdictions, for instance, that simply do not prosecute driving suspended thirds. And then there are other jurisdictions that not only want to prosecute them, but they want to book them. And so there's different perspectives here about what should be booked into the jail and what shouldn't. And booking restrictions on certain low-level offenses can help encourage a more uniform and just approach to those low level offenses. Booking restrictions, make no mistake. We find ourselves here, at least in part, pushing diversion programs because of booking restrictions, because people can't be booked into the jail on certain kinds of offenses. The jurisdictions are looking for alternative ways to deal with them, and without that pressure being put on the system, without the pressure to look for an alternative, it will once again only return to a situation where it's only too easy to book somebody into the jail. The person pleads out, after a few days in the jail, and the case is over, and there's no behavioral health follow-up whatsoever. So I understand what she's saying about booking restrictions, and I understand the impact of that on the street. But the other side of that is the pressure that it puts on the stakeholders and power brokers to, uh, you know, find alternative approaches to dealing with people that don't need to be booked into the jail because of the nature of their offenses. I mean, we could argue that a speeding ticket should be booked into the jail. I mean, it's not possible to do that, but I mean, that's an example of, we still prosecute speeding tickets, we write tickets, people pay fines, but the whole booking thing, the whole jail thing isn't part of it because it's not a jailable offense. I think that the restrictions put pressure on jurisdictions to find those alternatives.
Thank you, Stark. Chief Mertzik, go ahead.
Yeah, I agree with that. However, I think that another element that may be missing here is officer discretion. And I would find it hard pressed to find anybody, even if we could book for suspended third, and did like that would be the only, it would be a standalone, just pulled them over for suspended third, got booked into jail. I also know, the human beings that are in this department, and I know that I just don't see that being something that they would use as a tool because it's just not valuable, right? I think that they make really good decisions out there, and they also recognize that suspended third is very low level and would not consider a booking as the appropriate outcome for if that's all you have. We can what if a lot of scenarios, but what I'm talking about with booking restrictions is when somebody breaks into someone's home and then is not able to be booked. That's what I'm talking about when it's booking restrictions.
Thank you, Chief. Heather, go ahead.
So I have been doing some analysis on the jail bookings of 2023, 2024, and 2025. And I'd love to put together a presentation. I didn't have time to do that, but in 2023, it looks like there were about 9,791 bookings. Sheriff Tank, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I could be wrong. 10,391 in 2024 and 12,104 in 2025. So it jumped, right? It jumped 24% from 2024 to 2025. But that's actually heavily driven by warrant arrests and failure to appear arrests. And so it's not, increased. It's not a crime wave, so to speak. And I think that this is the level of analysis and data, and I'm not sure if the design build team is doing that, if these are the numbers that are driving bed count, I think then our role as IPRTF is understanding what are the different charges and what are the policy recommendations that could potentially reduce and prevent those charges from needing to be booked. So it looks like warrant arrests increased from 27% to 34% of the bookings, and FTA charges increased 19%, but failure to appear. And I could be wrong. I'm going to really, really double check this, but I'm reading that 70% of the bookings are people who have been in before. That 794 individuals over those 3 years were booked 10 or more times. And that the most booked person had 167 bookings in 3 years. And so a bigger jail doesn't resolve that, I think. It just holds them longer in between those cycles. And I think that's a layer here of that we want to make sure that for those people that are driving those repeat offenses, what is going to be in the jail that could potentially help them not be repeating and recidivating. Yeah.
Thank you, Heather. Roger Funk, please go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate what Chief Mertzig said. For a little bit of context, I've been in law enforcement for 30 years, and 11 of that was as a motorcycle traffic deputy. And I cannot think of a single time that I've ever booked somebody solely for suspended third. Officers use their discretion, cite and release for that, and refer them to court. When we're seeing bookings for suspended third, it's usually because they're also being booked for other offenses like DUI, or the suspended third is a warrant for suspended third because they failed to appear. I'm proud of the discretion that our officers use to not book people on those low-level offenses. That's not what we want to do
either. Thank you, Scott Cortice. Mayor Cortice, go ahead.
Yeah, I guess I want to reiterate some of the points made already. Booking restrictions from the small city perspective is a concern, especially if we build a jail of 480. We would agree with the sheriff that it probably should be larger, but of course we would also agree with everyone in the room. We don't know how we're going to afford that. But we do not want to have bookings in the foreseeable future. And so as small cities, we do encourage diversion, and we do want the behavioral health centers as well. So we don't want to take our eye off those balls either as we want to do this thing. And finally, one thing that's critically important to all of us is we want an efficient operation, one where we're not using a lot of extra labor to take care of the jail and the people in it. So I guess those 3 points I just continually go back on is that we need a big enough jail for our community. And I guess, Heather, I've heard your report now twice with all the numbers, but I would like that in some kind of a table or something so I could assimilate the data. You throwing out numbers, I'm pretty good with numbers, but you threw out a lot of numbers.
Sorry.
I need to see something, what you're pulling off and how you're doing your analysis. I would appreciate if you could put together that report you referred to.
I will. And 70% is actually higher than it's not that high. The recidivating it's about 19 to 22% of the people in our jail, so a fifth, are booked more than once in any given year. And their bookings account for close to 42% of all booking events, not 70%. That was looking at charges, not individuals. So, but this is the kind of information, I think, getting down to these layers and having the spaciousness in a conversation to fact check and share blind spots, because we all have a different piece of this puzzle. And when I looked at, Scott, one of the key documents I look at is the sheriff's jail use report, that's summary. You can look on the 2025 report that, so Bellingham is a high utilizer of the jail, high bookings, and there's a delta from 2024 to 2025 of about 280 more bookings than last year. And when you look at what is being booked more, it's possession of drugs and warrant issues. And so then those are the two things that I think, okay, if those are driving bookings up, there were 5 vehicle prowls booked last year. And so then one of my layers of questionings is, how could we book a bunch of warrants but not be booking the vehicle prowls? And how is that lining up with red, yellow, and green days in the jail? And so if this is the space to have that conversation, that's one of my questions that I'm not sure we all have answers for. So, but we all have pieces of the answers. So,
well, this is a good table to
Yeah.
resolve some of these questions. So, Dan Hamill, please go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. Good morning, everyone. So some of these items have been brought up, so I'm not going to spend time on them, including the infield officer diversion discretion, rather, to divert or not, or to not write the ticket for DWLS third. I guess what I'm trying to get at here is to codify the diversion programs as best we can. Heather, you brought up about, are we talking policy, are we talking programs, are we talking facilities? Yes to all those. When it comes to program, I'll contain my remarks to that. The prosecutorial diversion programs are just that. They are up to the discretion of the prosecuting attorney. That is an elected office in this county, and that office is up for election coming up this November. So what I want to do moving into the future is to make sure that if we are leaning into programs like LEAD and other programs like the I guess the alternative response team and others that have yet to be envisioned, how do we make sure that that is the law of the land, so to speak? And so that's that point. And then the other point is that what I've heard in the scenario planning is scenario 3 is the most likely candidate to reflect voter intent. It's also one that has yet to be fully realized when it comes to the financial viability of that particular scenario. So I'll stop there. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Dan. Maya, go ahead.
Thanks. Prosecutorial diversion programs are a big deal. We talk about them a lot at the county level, and it occurs to me that I don't know what prosecutorial diversion programs are being used in the smaller cities like Mayor Courthoise's city or city of Bellingham with Maryland. Like you're worried, the small cities are worried about booking restrictions, but I don't know what diversion programs you guys are utilizing, and I'm curious about that. I'd love to hear about them. Maybe there are models that we should be using at the county level to expand that too. I think it needs growth at all levels, but I don't know anything about how the small cities are diverting, and I'd love to hear about that. I don't know if this is the right setting, but it seems related. Thank you.
Thank you, Maya. Chief Erickson, go ahead.
Good morning, everyone. So a couple of thoughts as I was listening to folks talk. One thing that I want to point out is that we have consultant data relative to the Justice Project, bookings, arrests, releases, all of that sort of stuff. We provided them 11 years of data, which included everything that all of data points necessary to come up with trends, projections, what's been going on specifically over the last 2 years, but then again going back into 2014. And we're very close to having that report finalized. I imagine it should be in the next 2 weeks. And so, Scott, if you can hang on for some of that information, I think that it will prove to be very helpful for this discussion. And then the sheriff has made a point before, and I want to bring it up again, that the folks who are in the jail are being held based on a determination by either the prosecutor or the courts or both. And it is not the determination of the jail staff or any of the sheriff's office staff whether or not they stay or go. And so it's important to keep in mind that as things change in sentencing or determinations from the courts, that has a direct reflection on the number of beds needed for accomplishing the jail work. Thank you.
Thank you. And we have yet to hear from a prosecutor or anyone from the courts, and I would encourage you to speak up in this conversation. Who would like to go next? Well, there's a prosecutor now. I see Eric Ritchie.
Yeah, I'll chime in a little bit. So I just want to mention that Caleb's right, that once a person is booked, it is up to the courts to make a determination whether someone will stay or go. But otherwise, it is something that the sheriff works with as far as booking restrictions, and of course, law enforcement officers work with deciding whether or not to book or take them in. I have a question I've been thinking about for a while, and I don't know. It seems that we are currently operating under the assumption that future funding for additional capital projects may not be available. That's the way we're acting. Is it unwise to construct a smaller jail today with plans to expand, adding more beds later? I know we've talked about, building the jail so things could be added, but is it unwise to actually consider or plan for that? In other words, build what we think is best for our community and then, plan to expand later. And if expansion isn't reasonable, if that's just out of the question, what are the downsides to building a smaller facility, including all the things we want, all the essential services, and then still use the work center as a supplementary detention space for overflow or maybe additional capacity? I know that there would be more costs associated with operating the two facilities, but doesn't this take care of the problem with our shortages surrounding capital building? Just wondering what y'all think. And yeah, I'm glad the sheriff just chimed in because I think he can answer some of that. Thank you.
Sheriff Tanksley, please go ahead. And thank you, Eric.
Yeah, so right now, in terms of the amount of deputies that we have to operate a facility, it's tough right now to operate two different facilities. And even when the work center was built, it was supposed to be a temporary facility. So the idea of keeping two facilities open, I think that's a question that the county council is going to have to answer, because we're going to need more money. And having one facility would, it wouldn't mitigate everything, but it certainly would have all of our deputies in one space. The sheriff's office for far too long has had too many facilities over here, over there, transport a person from here to there. Even with the new jail, we're still going to have to, at some point, transport people for trials. The new jail itself hopefully will have some court space that, will serve its purpose other than trials. So I think I understand where the prosecutor's coming from, but this wasn't the plan to keep the work center open. That's just not, it wasn't in the plan at all. But I also want to talk about, someone asked about what the small cities are doing. I think it was Maya, maybe, in terms of of diversion. So with the sheriff's office, we do have alternative diversion programs, even for people that are sentenced, that for many years were utilized at a great extent. When a person is sentenced from a municipal judge or even a district court judge, they do have an option to have that person work alternative programs with the jail. I believe what we're seeing is an underutilization of that. And if we increase those programs, that could in fact sometimes decrease, depending on the program, the amount of people that we have in custody. But that's up to those municipal court and district court judges. That's not up to the sheriff. So we do have those programs in place for those persons that are sentenced. I do understand that. We also talked about, diversions that would happen on the street, so a person would go into the legal justice system. I do understand that. But having two facilities, that's not what we want. And I don't think that's feasible, but I do respect the statement. But yeah, that's certainly not what I envisioned.
Thank you, Sheriff. Under Sheriff Harris, please go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to echo the further state that when the interim work center was built, it was absolutely built as an interim work center designed to be there for 5 years. In fact, they built it as a warehouse. They didn't build it as a jail. If you go there, you can see that they use chain link fencing to help secure the secure areas. And the facility is already almost 20 years old. And because it was never built to be a long-term jail, it's already seen a lot of wear in places that you wouldn't expect. So if that is the plan, understand that we're going to have to make significant investments to improve that building for the long term. And also go back to the community members, the neighborhoods who we assured that this was going to be a jail for only 5 years and then converted to a warehouse space.
Very good. Mayor Cortice, one moment before I get to you. Would anybody like to speak to the current downtown jail in case people are thinking that that might possibly be used in addition to the new jail? I'm just wanting to get that out there in case that is something somebody is thinking. So Mayor Cortice, go ahead.
Well, I'll let Caleb go first because I think he wants to answer that one.
Okay. Caleb, please go ahead.
Trying to temper my response a little bit here. Sorry. So I think that we've demonstrated year after year after year after year, going back as long as I've worked here and then significantly longer, that the downtown jail is failing. There are many issues with the building, including codes that are not up to current standards. If we were to try and remodel or repurpose areas, we'd have to come up to new codes that we couldn't accomplish. It can't be used for office space because, again, it doesn't meet codes. And it has many, many, many aspects of failing infrastructure. And I think that it would be a significant cost to the county, not only to keep it open, but operational cost of this system would be far out of reach for us in the near future. I've heard it said a couple of times that, operating, an additional building might make sense in the capital cost arena, but it would have just a simple increase in duplicative costs for operations. I cannot overstate this. It costs a lot of money to duplicate services over two different buildings. And we've seen that over the last nearly 20 years of having the work center in operations. We will have to have more staff when we open the new facility. We're not going to be able to do the security aspects of the new facility without additional staff, much less the behavioral health and other supportive elements of a new facility without additional staff. And so I would just caution everybody to remember that operational cost is significant over the course of a building's lifetime, and adding in an additional building to that mix without the due consideration would be really problematic.
Thank you, Chief Erickson. I want to also thank Prosecutor Ritchie for bringing up the subject, because this is the table where we bring all the things up so that we can discuss them. So thank you for the creative thinking, and thank you for the responses. Mayor Cortes, go ahead.
Yeah, so relative to the work center, I'm going to guess, and maybe Caleb can correct me, but I'm guessing it takes 3 people 24/7 to run that place. That would cost about 1.5 to 2 million a year. If we had to do that for 10 years, that's a lot of money. But if we put that 1.5 or 2 million a year of labor cost into a bond, we could buy a lot more jail. Just so I think if we're willing to call the work center a relief valve, we should look at the money it costs to run the relief valve and put that into capital and make the jail more efficient.
Thank you, Mayor Cortes.
And then I'm going to one more
sorry,
comment.
go ahead. Yep.
Yeah. To Maya's comment, and now I'm going to step into an area I don't know much about it, but we use friendship diversion when the courts allow it for one of our diversion programs in Linden. I just texted my chief and he said that's what we use. I don't know anything about it. I just know that that's available.
All right. Thank you very much. I do want to ask, before we get to Arlene, that if somebody would like to speak about about the interlocal agreement and our budget, what our potential top spend is. I know that is a critical part of this conversation. And so if anybody from the executive's office or from the cities want to speak to that, that'd be those two issues. That would be great. Arlene, please go ahead. Arlene, you're muted.
Okay. I would like to agree with law enforcement about the use of work center. As I've said, I've spent 9 years working in the work center as a counselor in the crisis program. It is a temporary building, as was said. The cost of changing it would be really great. So it isn't very good to consider it for use because it's not practical. I think a jail plan that is in stages, that is to say, when 480 gets too big or too small, we'll go to 600 or whatever is needed. But at that point, money will be needed to be raised to support that, which completely takes care of the size. I think that we do have some data available. The police told us in the very beginning of this committee that there are 2 crimes that are the biggest crimes in Whatcom County, and that is DUI and domestic violence. The base of both of those crimes is completely psychological. That is to say, it can be addressed in counseling, and one does not have to have a mental illness or a serious condition to have this problem. So therefore, the behavioral health aspect of crime is addressed. Thank you.
Thank you, Arlene. Jed Holmes, go ahead.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. I'm responding. I think Peter kind of put it out there to talk a little bit about our financial constraints and with the revenue stream we have. As you are aware, we have an interlocal in place, which is an agreement between the county and the cities to jointly fund the construction of the jail and behavioral care center. Under the current agreement, the cities would be partners in this in the capital construction funding for 4 to 6 years. The current agreement would provide a little ballpark figure around $160 million if we continued to follow that agreement. After seeing some much higher estimates of what it would cost to build the jail that met kind of the goal laid out in the implementation plan, as well as that would help reduce the risk of booking restrictions into the future. We were asked to look and see, well, how much potentially could we create out of that, using the revenue stream that we have. The county can do that in two ways. We can either borrow more money over the long term, or we can extend our agreement with the cities, that cooperation, and help, through that fund more. And so, looking at that for both the behavioral care center and the jail capital construction, the maximum amount looks to be around $225 million. And if we would need about 20 million of that for the behavioral care center, then around 205 million is kind of what we're looking at the ceiling budget for capital construction. But again, that is the prerequisite for that is for the cities to continue to support this as long as maybe 10 years, or until 2035.
Oh, Mayor Lund, I see your hand up.
Good morning, everyone. I've just been listening and taking in all of the really good comments that folks have made today. Some points I want to emphasize are just, I think Mayor Cortés has done a good job, and also just, as someone that works to create the budgets, the operations side, and if we're considering like ongoing use of the work center or other decisions that have really potentially considerable impacts to cities' budgets, we really have to be mindful of those operational costs as we move forward right now. We have very real capital constraints that we're all working through right now. I'm approaching the capital constraints from the position of trying to be detached a little bit from the number of beds and really committed to outcomes. So how can we reach the outcomes that we all share, and that we want for our community? Because I acknowledge I don't have the expertise on the number, but I do know that what we build needs to have connections to reducing booking restrictions. It needs to have connections to services and rehabilitation. It needs to have connections to interception, and minimizing justice-involved community members. So all of these play in, but the operational piece is big. I would just add that the interlocal, one thing that people don't, I imagine the county would prefer that we were able to tackle it, but the interlocal even makes a commitment that we're going to demolish the current jail. I think there's a number around 8-point-some million to do that. We just that's not even part of our capital considerations, how we're going to tackle the legacy of the infrastructure of that building. So there's a lot of elements. I'm glad we're having this conversation. And to put some context around the operational costs, the city council voted to approve the 0.1% public safety tax, which will bring in around about $4 million for the city of Bellingham. Almost half of that will go to the increased per diem rate. So that will not be advancements in art. That's not advancements in more officers. It's not advancements in more record staff, all the ways we could be supporting or public safety in the community. It's going to pay for the existing per diem rate. So it really does matter that we structure it in a way that's we keep that in mind. And as we talk about more information and data around the jail, just a personal request to also not just look at average length of stays. I'd love to see some median data. When I heard Stark mention we had an individual that spent 5 years going before a murder trial, that kind of outlier can really skew averages in a pretty significant way. So always making sure we're looking at median data as well. Thanks.
There, go ahead.
I have a question. One of the questions I've been grappling with is that, and maybe I didn't understand it till now, for the jail booking restrictions, there's red, yellow, and green, right? And red is if there's more than a certain amount of people in the jail, there's no bookings anymore. Is that? And I guess, well, so my question is, one of my thoughts was, well, how are we not booking crime in real time if we have room to book a bunch more warrants? Because where my brain goes is like the court processing and the failure to appear to fix that. The jail can be a tool for compliance, but for a lot of people, it doesn't seem to be working. So what's the innovative program or approach that we could try to fix that warrant piece? But one question I have is it because a warrant is a court order that we still book them on red jail days? Is that what's happening? And therefore, if a bed in the jail is taken up by somebody who failed to appear for a crime that happened months ago or a year ago, and that bed is held for that court-ordered warrant booking, meaning that in real time, a crime that happens today can't be booked. Like that's a system issue to me, not a jail bed size issue. But I might be wrong about my understanding. So,
Chief Mertzig.
I don't want to speak for the sheriff's office, but maybe I could just send you the criteria, and that would also help probably the delta that you're seeing, because it's yes, it is crime specific. Violent crimes obviously take priority, but it's scalable. So yeah, the document that we're operating off of, I can just I'll try and check it.
I have that document, Chief Mertzig, but on red days, are warrants still booked?
Depends on what the warrant's for.
Okay.
Sheriff Tanksley, I saw your hand go up. Did you want to address this question?
I do want to say that in February of 2025, I'm trying to get the exact date. I did change the booking restrictions to the green, yellow, and red. And prior to that, the booking restrictions was done based upon the jail capacity in different areas. And for example, if an officer or deputy was on the street and there was jail bookings, that person would have to call down to the jail, say, hey, I have this person. Can I book this person? And what we did, we teamed up with Watcom, which is the 911 center. And I just want to give a thanks to Chief Mertzik for allowing them to work with us to actually have this in real time. So an officer or deputy could go to their computer and see what the booking restrictions are at that time. The booking restrictions that I implemented are probably the most less restrictive booking restrictions that we've probably had in the last 8 to 10 years. But they are still restrictions. And the restrictions themselves are based upon the capacity which the jail has for male and females. And because of what Chief Erickson said earlier with the design of the jail, that we do have to separate and we do have to separate, of course, the men from the women, but the capacity for the females are much less than women. And then when you think about different classifications of inmates, right, then your space becomes less within the jail. So if Chief Erickson wants to speak more on that, he can, but it's very complicated, but I tried to make it as I tried to make the process easier, and the feedback that I had, and maybe Chief Funk could respond to it as well, is that it really has helped agencies since February of 2025.
I would agree with that. Thank you, Sheriff.
Thank you so much. Does anyone who has not spoken want to ask a question, to make a statement? Rachel McGarity, you're fairly new to our group. You have some perhaps some insights you might be able to share with us. I'd just like to invite you to ask questions or make some observations.
Thank you. I do think one of the unique points of my position is that I'm not familiar with I wasn't familiar with the justice system until I began this work. And so I am not coming from a place of extensive knowledge. I'm kind of fresh eyes, I would say. A couple points that I think kind of have already been made. The work center is the equivalent of scenario one in terms of, dormitory style housing where there's not a lot of flexibility for different types of needs, lack of daylight access for the residents in there as well as the staff. And yeah, just really limited infrastructure support because it wasn't intended for long term. So just as we're kind of working through the scenarios, it's just helpful to remember that's the kind of quality level that we are currently operating at the work center. And then I think I kind of bring like the hospital admission volume, ED volume into like what the bed availability is and how that impacts capacity. That's the lens that I even see this work through because, we're kind of talking about what are the factors that create the intake and then what are the factors that determine if somebody's going to stay in for how long, because all of that is going to affect the volume in any one moment. And all of those factors are really fungible by lots of players. So I think as we're looking at how to really commit to a volume, we have to kind of get, I think Chief Erickson said this, kind of plans or not exactly commitments, but we need to be able to understand how those streams of people are going to change as they make it to us in the jail. And then I think the third point that I've been thinking about is, opportunities for intercept prior to jail is really crucial. And I don't think that we can build the jail in such a way. I don't think a way exists to build the jail that every time somebody comes in there, it's so excellent that they'll never need to come back again. So we have to be careful about what reasonable goal we set for the role of the jail in the restorative justice that we're hoping to deliver to all of our community. There is absolutely a role for the jail to participate in that restoration. And again, looking at those streams of people and where they're impacted in other parts of our community is going to influence the need for our jail. So those are the insights that I have. I'm happy to answer questions. From a medical point of view, there's absolutely a lot to be gained from really thoughtful design that ensures that everybody has access to the care that they need while they're here.
Thank you very much, Rachel. Council members.
I'm
can-
sorry.
Oh, yeah.
If you would, I would like Rachel to introduce herself since this is a very new position with the sheriff's office.
Thank you, Sheriff Tinsley. My name is Rachel McGarity. I am the brand new Correctional Health Services Manager for our correctional division here at the Sheriff's Office. I am a nurse by training, palliative care and ICU care, and I am a longtime member of Whatcom County. I grew up here. I met many of you at the sequential intercept model work that we did, which was the best introduction I could ask for into this world because I really got to know a lot of the players early. And my role is really to ensure that the health services that we offer, including behavioral health, medical health, dental health, et cetera, are all really, really high quality and can, ensure that the care of everyone inside our building is where it needs to be, residents and staff.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Scanlon, please go ahead.
Thanks, Peter. And Peter, thanks also for the suggestion to join in the meeting today. I've been listening in. Regarding the conversation around booking restrictions, I'm wondering, has IPRTF ever studied booking restrictions in how other counties conduct that practice? If that has not been done, I think that would be interesting from where I sit on council, or if that has been done, I'd love to see that report. Because to me, so much of size of the jail, plus future operations do hinge on definitions of booking restrictions, and how it's utilized in practice. And I know currently the sheriff, sets the policy on booking restrictions. We have the color coded practice in place. And then it was great to hear from Chief Funk about how some of these things occur in practice. But I think one of the things we're dealing with here is a lack of potentially information and trust, right? Because the community has to trust that Chief Funk's officer is making that decision on a day-to-day basis in a way that our community agrees with. And so I think shedding a little bit more light on that about how those decisions are made and looking at other counties, other local jurisdictions, how they're setting those policies might be interesting. And for me, just shedding some of my light on my thinking here on some of this, I think it may be helpful to consider setting a definition. We really don't have a definition of booking restrictions in code, and we don't have it in the interlocal agreement. And we keep talking about this, that the cities want to remove booking restrictions, but we don't really have a agreed upon definition of that. So I think some study of that and how other counties do this would be really helpful to inform some of the decisions that council makes here in the next few months. The other thing I just wanted to comment on, Maya asked about diversion programs, and I know there was some response in that from some folks. I'm also interested in learning more about what some of the cities are doing on pre-arrest diversion, because I think some of the diversion programs that were mentioned and the sheriff mentioned one program that was a post-arrest program, and I believe Friendship is also a post-arrest. So I'd also be interested in learning more about what some of the local law enforcement agencies are using regarding pre-arrest diversion, as that would have a major impact on the name of this task force, reducing and preventing incarceration. So I'm also interested in learning more about those opportunities for our community as well. Thanks.
Thank you, John. Stephen Gockley, former co-chair of the IPRTF and longtime Justice Project member, please go ahead.
Thank you, Peter. Based on those roles, I was a part of the development of the implementation plan, the advocacy for the ordinance, and sort of gravitated reluctantly into one of the spokespeople in the campaign to pass the 0.2% levy. I'm not sure which level of Heather's hierarchy I'm talking on, but I think I'm going to call it the values level. We've heard reference to commitments that are made in the interlocal agreement, which are really acknowledgments of preferences to limit booking restrictions. We've even had a reference to promises that were made in 2006 to the neighborhood on the work center transitioning out of use in criminal justice. What we haven't talked about is the promise that was made almost daily in the campaign that got us to this point, that 50% of this money was to go to build out a community-based, non-criminal justice treatment system that was the linchpin. It was the foundation. It was the essential element to the reform that we were envisioning, the reform that we structured in the plan, the reform that's spelled out in the ordinance, and the reform that people voted for, many of whom voted for that reluctantly. I can't tell you how many times Peter and I heard people say, this is just a Trojan horse for building a jail and not doing much of anything about treatment and diversion, which was their priority. And we said over and over again, as sincerely as we could, no, no, no. We've spent time developing a balanced system that will change how things operated. I'm disappointed at how siloed our conversation has gotten the last several months. I know it's money driven. I know that's a nut that is going to be enormously difficult to crack, but we're not talking about what diversion programs aren't in place and could be in place. We're not talking about building out the capacity for treatment. And I don't know how we can be talking about jail size without talking about those, without having active planning, which we are not doing right now, as to the extent that we're planning the capital improvements. So I guess I'll express some disappointment at how we've abandoned the other half of a promise that we made to the county population. And since the money is the driver of so much of late and is driving the consultants, I want to endorse exploration, at least, of Eric's idea that we think about sequencing incrementally the size of the jail as the county grows, so that we can fund a new jail because the conditions need that, and a jail that's adequate for the moment and the next few years, so that we can then retain the money necessary to build out the interventions, the non-carceral interventions that we think need to be such a large part of our system, have not been such a large part of our system, and the people expect to be such a large part of our system. Thanks.
Thank you, Stephen. Mayor Lund.
I just wanted, can everyone hear me okay? I had to put headphones on.
We can hear you just fine. Thank
Great.
you. There's no background noise.
I think John raises such a good point about trust and how that shows up in this conversation. And I just wanted to share from my personal perspective, one of the ways that has been incredibly helpful for me to build trust and understanding is actually in my ride-alongs. And I would invite everyone that's in this conversation that I know BPD is, stands ready any day, anytime to do some ride-alongs. So you can kind of see, not kind of see, you get to see officer discretion in the field play out in real time. So I would encourage everyone to spend some time doing that, so that when, Chief Funk and Chief Mertzig, Sheriff Tanksley are speaking about officer discretion, everyone's had the opportunity to see for themselves how that plays out every day in our community.
Thank you, Mayor Lund. Executive Sidhu, please go ahead.
Well, good morning, everybody. I really appreciate very candid, open discussion. I think that's good for our community. I just want to make one observation that our laws are such that diversion, mental health, behavioral health programs, restorative justice are all dependent upon the people who would like to take advantage of, not on the people, on the providers. I think this is a big factor in our nation. And having a la carte available, if somebody doesn't want to eat something, we can force them. I think this is a big factor in our thoughts. I just wanted to share that. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. Are there other questions, observations? I'm really curious where we stand as far as our alignment as a group and the areas of tension that we have. What are the questions that we need to resolve before a recommendation is made in presumably the April meeting for this group? So any thoughts, questions, observations? Maya, please go ahead.
Just curious, when the new reworked design proposals are presented to the exec's office, I just want to know how that would be relayed to this group, and so that we can make sure we have time to consider and those in giving our opinions.
Yeah, thanks for that question, Maya. So our plan would be to share those with the Finance and Facility Advisory Board and the County Council as soon as they're in their final form. And so I anticipate that being sort of the last week of March. And then we're scheduling a special FAB meeting sometime between March 30th and April 2nd to review that information. As co-chairs of the IPRTF, Heather and Peter are both on the Finance and Facility Advisory Board. And so our preference would be that they sort of be the conduit of that information to this group.
Councilmember Hamel, please go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to revisit something. I think we drifted past Stephen Gockley's observations pretty quickly here, and I just don't want to do that. I think that was such an important part of the decision making when it came to the third attempt at passing the jail levy for and I'm just simplifying it there, but that 50-50 split with the cities was key. And when Peter, when you're talking about like these decisions that need to be made coming up in April, and we're all talking about that, I don't mean to single you out, but when we're talking about that, that has to be a part of the conversation. We made some pretty serious commitments, we being City of Bellingham, when it came to near-term investments in capital, followed by operational dollars to provide for behavioral care services. And when I look at these scenarios here, it just gets more and more challenging to even get to a baseline of what we have wanted in what I think the voters voted for in our community. So I want to make sure that we are very cogent in our thinking in this decision-making process. And I just want to put that out there. I don't want to go past what this conversation used to be and now currently is.
Thank you, Dan. Melora, please go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of conversation today about diversion and programs that aim to get people out of the legal system. And I think it's just important for this body to know that the current funding for existing programs is not sustained. We just had significant cuts from the legislature for both the LEAD and the alternative response team programs, and we anticipate going into the biennium that there will be additional leads. There will be additional cuts to those programs and potentially other programs. And so I think we also need to be realistic about the state of the budget, and that we may have to make a decision to just keep what we have, let alone try to expand. And so I just want that to be in everyone's head as they're thinking about the importance of diversion. If we're talking about expanding, supporting the small cities to do new programs, we would need additional revenue to do so. And right now we're looking at just sustaining existing programs.
Very good. Thank you, Melora. Kayla, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. And I just sort of reflecting on Stephen's comments a little bit, and just really, I think obviously we're having a lot of conversations around the jail facility project as that decision is forthcoming, but really don't want to lose sight of all of the good work that is happening concurrently on the behavioral health and diversion front, and it's just not front and center in this conversation. Certainly Melora, certainly Hannah, are folks who can speak to that better than I can. But even just when we're talking about this facility project, we are talking about a $35 million capital construction to a behavioral care center. And that is far, far more than was originally envisioned as part of this project. And that represents tremendous commitment from our decision makers. They're essentially saying we are willing to sort of constrain how much we're willing to spend on this jail so we can make sure we're leaving room for that facility. And so I just really don't want that to get lost as part of this conversation. And then similarly, we've had a lot of success recently when it relates to leveraging external funding and submitting grant applications for our prosecutorial diversion programs, for response initiatives. I think everyone heard a little bit about the True Blood diversion funding we're leveraging for permanent supportive housing construction here in Bellingham, and a companion case management program. We just spent last week submitting for congressionally directed spending to support the behavioral care center. So I just really, I understand that folks feel like this is a jail-centric conversation, but want to assure people that all of that work is happening in parallel. And given the financial realities, it's more important than ever that we're doing that work to get outside funding for those activities.
Thank you, Kayla. Mayor Lund, go ahead.
I would just appreciate what Melora and Kayla just said. To Stephen Gockley's very important point, part of my calculus right now is we haven't dropped the commitment to services, but we're faced with the reality to construct the facilities for that commitment to services, like where those services can take place is going to cost a lot more. And so we're looking at how do we build the things where the commitments can take place that we've made. And so it feels like it's separate and siloed, but I think it's very connected. And there are many ways that we're trying to explore alternative sources of funding for services right now. With our approval from the AG's office and CJTC for Bellingham to receive the 0.1% public safety tax, we're also now grant eligible. And we are seeking what we thought was going to be an expansion of the alternative response team. Looks like it may be preservation of the existing ART services, but that's a good example of how we're trying to continue our commitments to programs like ART right now. So I just wanted to throw that out there. We are still seeking all alternative avenues. And if Chief Mertzig wants to speak to that.
Yeah,
Thank you, Mayor Lund.
It kind
Go
of
ahead, Chief.
raises the point of, I got this from the last finance advisory meeting, is this is the only funding mechanism that can be used to build a jail, the only. And so I think that being said, and knowing that, we are, as we put our grant proposal together, it's very heavily, we're going to be, again, asking to supplement and also expand. I mean, who knows? From the state, they could always say no. So we're at least going to ask for a huge amount of money from the state for ART and LEAD and whatever else we can we can do in addition to victim services. So I think that's important to keep in mind as well. And I think that the legislature is demonstrated well in both ways. They've cut, but they've also demonstrated a capacity that they know that this is a huge need in a lot of communities, and so we're going to be looking at every way possible to get that from the state.
Mayor Cortice, go ahead.
I guess I continually hear, the behavioral health side, but I guess I have to remind everyone I'm representing all the small cities, and we in the county probably voted for the jail for capacity. And I'm sure a good chunk of Bellingham citizens also voted for the whole thing for capacity in the jail. And so spending, we got it anyway. And I guess to get the jail we want, we're going to have to spend enough money on it to make it the jail that everybody desires to have for our community. And it's going to be a tough decision. I've been listening to the consultants, as many of you have been. We all know delaying a decision is very costly. I think I threw out the number the other day of $700,000 a month of buying power we lose for every month we delay. And Peter, you asked for, where do we go from here? I think to get us to where we need to go, we have to make a decision on how we're going to split the money up. And we've talked about it. Jed's brought it up. 225 is kind of our maximum number. I think we ought to be settling in and getting comfortable with a $205 million jail and a $20 million behavioral health center, and then go after money anywhere we can. Talk to the state, talk to the feds to see if they'll cover our $20 million for the behavioral health center, and then use that $20 million either for capacity or to continue to improve the jails to make it more jail friendly to the people that are in it. But we have to give our consultants a number so they can do some design to show us what we can get for that number. Right now, I would love to spend the contingency on making the jail either bigger or better, but the contingency is so large we don't know what to do with it. But if we give them the time and the effort and the energy to start putting into a design on paper, we can learn what we're going to get. And so I just encourage all of us to come up, and I think the number should be 205 and 20. But if there's some other split, let us know. And then give it to the design team and let them go so we can find out what we get for the money. Thanks for
Thank you,
listening.
Mayor Cortice. Heather, go ahead.
My sincere, I don't know if it's fear, but just, I know we all feel the weight of the consequences of decisions in this moment. And I think what's related to jail bed needs is efficiencies of the system too. The court processing, the 90% pretrial because of what the process of the courts and the judges, and then there's a section too of people that it truly is poverty driven, cycling through because of homelessness, substance use, and none of this is simple, and all of it is different strategies for different people who end up in our jail. And I also think looking at genuinely who is in the jail and why, and the violent crimes that actually are booked, and the small cities looking at the numbers of people, right? Like Mayor Cortice Linden booked, I think, 370 people last year. And so my worry is, will we build a jail that is just saying we're going to accept the inefficiencies of this system, and instead of also looking at how do we hold the system accountable to creating more efficiencies and reforms and doing better for those people that are cycling through. And so I appreciate the time to process and just really honestly share, because I think we would regret looking back in 30 years, no matter what the decision is, if we didn't take the time to really no one will be able to say that we were hasty and rushed to a decision. And I do think that that is actually a good thing for magnitude of this decision. So
I would like to say that I appreciate what you're saying, Heather, and I think that no matter what it is that we build, we have a responsibility and we'll have a need to take into account each and every factor that fills our jail and to divert whenever possible. I'd really like to say that as far as a 205-20 split that Mayor Cortice was talking about, it seems right to me because we need to, the best spend we have on for behavioral health, as far as I'm concerned right now, is the facility that we promised folks. And the 50-50 split may need to be relaxed to accomplish building out the behavioral health trauma-forward, trauma-informed design facility that we need. And that is something that I'm willing to have a serious conversation about. Anything less, and we're going to be warehousing people, and that is what like we are now. And I just do not see Whatcom County deciding that that is the best pathway forward. That's my own.
the bummer though,
Mhm.
Peter, I think is that those numbers represent a trade-off, like all of the commitments, right? The interlocal commits to all sorts of things that the reality is we're not going to be able to meet all of those commitments with this revenue stream. And we're making these decisions with imperfect data, which then forces the debate into rhetoric, values, and what's more important, the 50% split to the voters or this facility that people think they're getting or booking, and that's messy and complicated and really consequential.
It's a disappointment that we do not have the data and the data system that we needed. And we need to do much better. And we need to move forward with that to resolve these issues moving forward. Holly, I saw your hand up. We can take one more comment and then we should get to public comment and look at the rest of the agenda. So, Holly?
Yeah, thank you. First, I just want to acknowledge the caliber of this conversation and really, I just appreciate the IPRTF so much. As the person who's been co-facilitating the J-pop, I actually want to go back to a comment that Maya made early on about other components for the design that I think are really important to the J-pop and really important to reducing recidivism. And Maya, I'd like you to say those again. And I remember that Kayla, you had said you could get those by the end of March. But I would love to see those in the designs and in the analyses and actually in the scenarios because I think they're critically important. So Maya, would you be willing to restate those?
I mean, I mentioned visitation and programming space, but I don't have the. I think that Caleb or Melora, I think a lot of people could chime in and say, okay, or probably anyone on this call could chime in and say, design number one is seriously lacking, and like the whole dimension, lots of dimensions. Sorry, I don't have a list in.
Okay. Well, at any rate, I do think that what's coming out of the J-pop and the conversations we're having have to do with making sure, Melora has spoken to it too, that we have the support system so that we're reducing recidivism and providing the support that people need to visit people, to get, counsel with their legal, get access to legal counsel. All those systems are really important to the success of the jail. So I just want to highlight that and as reflected in what I'm hearing from the J-pop. Thanks.
Thank you. Speaking of J-pop, let's see, we have on the agenda before public comment, we have report outs from Finance and Facility Advisory Board. I would frankly say that we have covered everything that we talked about there. We have Justice Advisory Work Group, the JAW. Again, I think we've covered everything that has come up in those meetings. And that leaves the J-pop. And I wonder, Holly, if you would like to say something about our last J-pop meeting. At the beginning, I made mention of the terrific panel discussion that we had. Is there anything else that you would like to mention?
No, just that the meetings have been really informative, and that we're going to continue to look at these issues about the disproportionate incarceration of people of color, in particular the Indigenous community, and that yeah, and that we are in a time of just learning a lot about what is going to actually shift the system at a more fundamental level. So I just encourage people to watch the videos and come if you can. The J-pop meetings have been great, and I really appreciate everybody who's putting time into them.
The cadence for J-pop seems to be that we're having lived experience frontline worker uh, panels and then discussing them in greater detail in the following meeting. And it's well worth your time to watch these meetings. For all of us involved in policy, getting down to the voices of the people subject to these policies is absolutely critical. I'm going to make a executive decision to not have tomorrow's meeting unless there is some objection. I think that we have had a really a good, robust conversation on this topic, and don't feel that that tomorrow's meeting is needed. So,
excuse me, Mr. Chair, tomorrow's
yes.
meeting is still a joint meeting between the two committees. There are other things scheduled on the agenda. And because of the membership of both committees, there is always a possibility that a majority or a quorum of the IPRTF will attend. So unless the co-chairs of those two committees want to go ahead and cancel, I think the meeting will be going forward. Dan, I know Raylene's not here.
Dan, it's up to you. I do know Raylene is not able to attend this meeting, so what are your thoughts?
We have no designs on canceling tomorrow's meeting.
Okay, well, very good. I'm sorry to I didn't mean to try to cancel your meeting, Dan. I was referring really to this portion of the discussion for your meeting. So thank you
that
for
agenda
the
item is still on that's still on in play.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, very good. Excellent. Well, I will look forward to attending, and that is open to everyone here. And now it's time for public comment. Do we have here in the conference room? It is only Heather and me. It looks like we have a hand up online.
Andrew, go ahead.
Hi, this is Jamie Douglas. I'm listening here with my wife, Andronetta, to the meeting. I wanted to make the following comment. I've heard kind of underlying many of the perspectives coming from pretty different points of view. One that I hear a lot is the idea of we need to build a jail. And wouldn't it be nice if we could siphon off some of the number of people that go into the jail by having behavioral health and diversion programs? And I think that's a completely wrong-headed view of what we're trying to do here. My own view is that the booking in the jail should be the action of last resort. When we don't have better options to try to be able to deal with a situation, then we're going to have to wind up incarcerating people. I don't know I haven't heard any stories where the incarceration process has been a benefit to the And I see Scott has left because I guess maybe I offended him. But anyway, um, we don't really. Oh, you're back, Scott. Okay. Um, I, I, I understand the perspective that says, okay, let's just incarcerate people and make the public safe. But I think that actually, in the long run, it does a huge amount of damage to our community. We need to be looking about doing the kinds of diversion, mental health that you've all talked about. But the main perspective I think that we ought to be taking is that incarceration's the step of last resort. And so that means that we have to have all of these other options really fully robust and available. And if we're going to reduce funding for something, we should reduce funding for the jail. If you got to spend $1 and you can't spend it on anything else, it should go to the jail last. It should go to behavioral health, diversion programs, a lot of other types of programs that actually have a better chance of righting the ship for that individual, their family, and our community. And we should only be using the incarceration where somebody really poses that kind of existential threat to the community or to themselves. Thank you for taking my comment.
Thank you, Mr. Douglas. I appreciate your willingness to do public comment. Is there anybody else from the public who would like to speak? All right. And Dan, again, what time is the meeting tomorrow?
Jill Nixon, I believe we're at
11:30 a.m.
11:30.
Okay.
Yeah. Sorry about that.
Great.
Yeah.
Since it is being held, I just want to make sure that anybody who is interested in continuing this conversation, it sounds like it will be on the agenda, and please attend that meeting. I'll make sure to be there. All right, and with that, that is the end of our meeting for today. Thank you so much for joining, and we will see you all soon.